Well, I'm Melissa, and I'm an undergraduate student at UCSD. I'm studying psychology right now. So
Yeah.
That's pretty much.
I'm Siddharth. I'm a PhD student in electrical and computer engineering, working with Professor Sinowski. I work on computation, neuroscience, and emotions. Apart from that, I'm also the fellow editor of UCSD Journal of International Affairs. And I also am writing a book on the Indian American founding fathers.
Cool. Thank you.
Indian American founding fathers.
Oh, yes, please. Yeah.
I'll be in and out because I'm running an experiment, but I'm in Kay Ty's lab, and I'm on the project studying social isolation and like the dorsal rapid nucleus dopamine neurons, and also in some other projects in her lab studying how we process valence in the amygdala. And my name is Mackenzie. Yeah, great.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Can you join us at the table here?
I'll be in and out of it, but
That's
it's
all
all
right.
fine.
That's all right.
So what we're going to do is go into the mindfulness issues at the beginning that you can speak to, so that at least we can have your wisdom before you have to depart. So I think some of the interesting stuff that...
I just want to say, I also have to depart at not too much after you have to depart. Sorry, just to give a time frame, because I have to be at a meeting at, I think my meeting's at 1.
Okay,
So,
well, it was on the agenda.
We'll do our best.
It said 11:30 to
2.
1.
So I might have to leave like right at 1 is all I'm saying.
Okay,
Okay.
that'd be lovely. Then you'll miss your food.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, guys.
So if we start with a lot of those questions that came up yesterday were very complicated, unlike this fortune cookie, which I got today. Be mischievous and you will not be lonesome. So apparently that's the solution to loneliness. No, all right, sorry. So the question here is, how do we deal? One of the things that the questions that kept on coming up yesterday were looking for strategies. Nobody was taking issue with the fact that the studies all show that there's been a massive increase, particularly in the last 5 to 6 years, particularly in the 16 to 24 age group, professing loneliness. One of the things we had to deal with last night was whether that was a manifestation of more reportage or whether it was real. And I think the sense was that it was real. But then the question is, how do you deal with that? And a lot of the people were talking about what kind of communal situations can one create that could replace certainly the dwindling amount of people at the community spirit thing that you find in religion. How do you get people together? How do you get people to make friends? How do you get people to engage? Because strangely, and for allegedly a social species, there's certainly a generation now which self-professedly doesn't think it's very good at doing those things. So I'd like to know what some of the solutions are, and then I'd like to hear from you about whether that was nonsense or whether that's the way you feel about it, or whether you've seen this happening in your classes on campus and so on. But mindfulness is now manifesting itself on many campuses. And I wonder if you could tell us how you think it addresses this problem of loneliness, how it fits into the perspective.
So do we know what mindfulness is? Maybe we can start there, kind of give an operational definition of what this...
Yeah, can you hear clearly enough on the...
Also, could you take your badges off, because I think you don't need them in here.
No, we don't need them.
So do you guys know...
Put the microphone closer, then that might be easy.
Is this better?
Okay, yeah.
Great. So I'm just going to give a definition that we use in our laboratory of what mindfulness is. There's a lot of definitions out there, but what we do in our laboratories, we really try to strip it down to its core, right? And what is that? It's this non-reactive awareness to present moment experience. Okay, so that could be sensory, that could be affective, that could also be interpersonal. So being aware in a non-reactive fashion to the present moment. And there's different ways we can cultivate mindfulness. So we can have, there's, mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation, compassion meditation. I mean, there's a whole umbrella, but we tend to subsume into 2 different types of mindfulness meditation, that's shamatha and vipassana. So shamatha meditation is really focusing one's attention onto some sort of autonomic stimulus, usually the breath, as a metaphor of the present moment, right? So really allocating our attention to the breath. Vipassana is kind of a little bit more advanced in practice. So this is really monitoring one's awareness in a non-reactive fashion, kind of just watching experience as it unfolds over time. And typically what we think is that this kind of state of mindfulness, of practicing mindfulness, should over time and with practice translate into a trait. Okay, so you're flexing that muscle, right? You're kind of weak in the beginning, right? More and more exercise, you become strong. So similar concept here. So I thought that might be a good idea just to start, to really situate us before we get into loneliness. Yeah.
So what I've kind of understood about mindfulness at a brain, to drop back to the brain, is that it prunes pathways that you don't necessarily need, connections between neurons that maybe you're making and over time and aren't beneficial to you. This is how meditation can help treat addiction and things like that. Is that accurate? Is that something that works into your definition? Is that something we've seen and quantified?
So there's a big interest right now in mindfulness for addiction behaviors. Whether or not it prunes or facilitates connections we didn't think were there, not really aware of that literature, but the functional connections of mindfulness are starting to be mapped out. So in relation to pain, I am aware of that. Mm-hmm. Pain and addiction, certainly there's some overlap there. There is a lot of research that suggests that mindfulness does break down operant conditioning. So, there's quite a bit of work there in the addiction literature that these pathways we know are conditioned through this operant does tend to get broken down with some training. Are you familiar with that work?
No, but I was going to add a different take on it.
Cool.
But did you want to say more? So I was going to say, the one word you haven't used yet, I loved the way you described mindfulness, is non-attachment is a big word in mindfulness. That you have thoughts, feelings, and emotions, but you are not your thoughts, feelings, and emotions. They're experiences that you're having. And so the non-attachment is understanding that. And I think when it comes to associations and connections, I don't know if it's pruning or changes in synaptic strength, is that what we usually do as humans, the reason that we suffer as humans is because an event happens and then we immediately associate it with something else. We just feel the need to associate it. So somebody sends you a text and it triggers you didn't like what they say, and now you're associating it with a year ago when somebody said something similar, or an idea that you have about what it means. So the non-reactive, the non-attachment is like almost loosening that tie between the event and all the storytelling around the event. And if that's a change in synaptic strength, maybe that's what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right, yeah.
This kind of reminds me of,
stuff for me.
in Buddhism, the phenomenon of clinging. It's broken down. It's
Right.
exactly
It's the opposite of
or
non-attachment.
no appraisal, right? So these narratives we have around stimulus
yeah.
exactly start to become more malleable with more and more training.
Right.
So it's a background awareness of your feelings, but you don't take any action based on those awareness of those feelings you have, yes? You detach yourself.
It's wise to think before you act. That's a general principle to live by. But that is not to deny the inner experience. And I sometimes think that people think mindfulness is about staying really even on the inside. It's not about that at all. It's about fully allowing that inner experience to change like the weather and to understand that pattern and to flow with it. And then you can decide in the moment whether that feeling deserves an action attached to it.
It's to certain level of, it pass a threshold that, hey, I need to take action. I have these feelings to this level of intensity, and I want to take action on that.
It's usually a bad idea to take immediate action because you often regret.
Right.
Just put aside for 10 minutes or an hour.
Yeah. Sleep on it.
Or
I'm
sleep
a
on
big
it.
fan.
Yeah.
Never act before sleeping on it, especially if it's big.
Exactly. And then I heard that, I saw that hyperactive people or autistic patients, when they have a disturbance in their system, sudden things happen. So if they are a child, they are just screaming. We have just one of them in our mosque that he just screamed when something sudden happens. And then in crisis, they fail to make decisions. So they do abnormal reactions to sudden things that happen, not match to other people's reactions. This is what I
So I
saw.
would just tweak that word abnormal and say atypical.
Yeah, atypical.
Because I work with kids with autism and I find it fascinating. They just have a different reality than us, and I
Exactly.
don't like the way we're always trying to be like, oh, this is the right way to act.
But
Anyway,
this
yeah.
is the right way based on their circuitry or
Yeah,
based on
exactly.
their brain. Yeah.
Exactly. They
This is the
stim,
right
they
action.
flap, and they're wondering why the rest of us aren't doing this.
Exactly. And he keeps saying it's not fair. It's not fair. Whatever he
Right.
don't like, he's saying that that's not fair. So this is what I found. So they fail to control their moods as other people can do.
Well, that's a
To
whole other.
adapt.
That's a whole other
Yeah.
topic.
Yeah.
Maybe the flexibility will be useful here. There's,
Adaptation.
yeah,
Yeah.
that might be helpful. It appears to be a core mechanism of mindfulness in many domains. Were you going to say something?
No. I was just thinking that it's all very well to say that you should sleep on things, but this entire society is predicated on going faster and faster and faster. I mean, particularly this nation, anywhere. I mean, this is not stop, think, reflect.
You think we're a little reactive in America? Yeah, I think so. Especially politically right now.
Yeah.
Well, in jobs and everything, it's immensely competitive. I mean, what I was reading yesterday about people changing their selves on Instagram rapidly, all the time, editing themselves so that they presented a better brand. Presentation of self in everyday life, Irving Goffman. Daniel Boorstin, the image. The celebrity is somebody who's well known for being well known. This is a brand society.
Totally.
But one of the problems is that the way people present themselves on Instagram is their best self, and of course, if you see all these other people looking
So-
terrific, you wonder about yourself, and that doesn't make you feel very good.
So here's a good exercise. Last week I was interviewed for this project, and a friend of mine came over and he took 400 pictures of me while I was being interviewed.
Oh my goodness.
And you look at the pictures of yourself. It's a really good exercise because what we usually do is we find the best picture and we go like, this is me. This perfect mouth shape and my hair's perfectly, but you're all those pictures. And so it's a real study in yourself to be willing to see like the picture with caught like me like this, and one like this, like they're all me.
Yeah.
And to really kind of fully accept they're all me. I got to say that, you guys, because everyone's so worried about their image, and it's like, well, get over yourself.
Well, and I think it's more even than just comparing yourself to other people on Instagram. The whole like alteration of yourself when you're entirely posting to the world somebody that's not you, there becomes like a warped sense of self, right? Or a lost sense of self, because who you are is not who you are being who you're representing, right? And so it becomes, I think, a deeper issue than just comparing yourself to everybody else. You're comparing yourself to the perfect you. And then this ties into a question that I have, though. You said that your thoughts, emotions, and feelings aren't
They're not you. They're not.
So then that's something I would say that would be like the deepest form of me. So if that's not even me, then what would you?
I always get that question.
Self. Then there is a self topic to define what is self.
Right.
Where is the self? That's
Where
always
is
my
the self?
favorite
What is the
question.
self?
That's one of the things my lab studies, by the way.
Wow.
But, oh yeah, I
Wow,
mean, we
that's
really
great.
go deep in my lab. But I will say this, sometimes when people say, well, if I'm not my thoughts, feelings, and emotions, who am I? I say, well, you're pure consciousness.
So the question then becomes, right, if we're going to loop back into mindfulness.
Yeah.
Well, as we were talking
Yeah.
earlier, as soon as you start drilling into this stuff and get
get
into the
trapped.
Buddhist part of it, and then you're looking at things like no self,
Oof. Yeah.
how on earth can you use these techniques in a way that allows people to flourish?
So I think in Buddhism, I think it might be nice to bring up this concept of impermanence. So through mindfulness, right, you start to notice that your thoughts, your sensations, your emotions are very fleeting in nature, right? You start to become very aware of that. So you start to watch that, and it's metacognition, right? Certainly with more practice, I'm always hesitant to say no self, because I'm not quite sure what that means. Maybe you can help me out there. But it does seem to, self seems very malleable in that sense. In mindfulness, we do see kind of this dissociation between, self and other, right? More connectedness between individuals with nature, with everything around us, right? And that seems to break down a bit. But, be more aware of self, right, with a capital S. I think that's tricky. There are some neural correlates that we know of that do relate to self-referential processing. But I think that's a little bit different than discussing, what is self? What is me as a stream of consciousness? I don't know if we have the tools yet to necessarily tackle that problem. But I can say that meditation does allow one to be more aware of that fleeting nature of all phenomenon. Internal, right? Interoceptively, exteroceptively.
Do you mind if I jump in?
Please.
So I think it's really interesting what you guys have going on about mindfulness, and maybe I just want to ask, do you guys consider this to be an action? And also, maybe if I could tag on and comment onto what you guys were saying about what we have come to believe to be mindfulness is maybe not just or not just an understanding of the self, but like a mirror of society within ourselves. So is there not the concept of no self, but then again tying back into the Buddhist philosophy of letting go of desire and things that constrain you into the mortal world. And so I guess that could also, I don't know if I'm going on a little
You're bringing up a few different topics, so
yeah.
I wanted to go down the path of interconnectedness because you spoke to that, and I want to bring up one of the questions that came up last night. Somebody had a question. They said, how do I get over my judgmentalness of other people who aren't in touch with themselves?
But so then if we can maybe push past that a little bit and go into our desire to be much more than just ourselves. And
well, that's when let me, if I can just finish the sentence and then I'll come back to yours, which is I was going to say that the answer to how to get over your judgment about someone else who isn't in touch with themselves is to realize that sometimes you're not in touch with yourself. And it's every time my kids taught me this, that you point at somebody else and you say, you're this. There's 3 fingers pointing back. Because there's no experience that we have that isn't shared by all humans. And that's what I was trying to get towards, the interconnectedness. Anyway, I wanted to make that point, and maybe that's not where you were going, so I hand it back to you. But
no, that's okay. Definitely clarifies a little bit of my understanding of what you guys are working towards. I guess I just think it's interesting then that in this world and the lives that we're living, it does come down to self-discovery and understanding, what makes us tick or what makes us who we are as individuals. And a lot of times we're not aware of that identity that we take hold of and that we want to become in the long run. So I guess that in a way could also tie into being more mindful of the things in our world that affect that perception of who we are.
Well, can I ask you a question? Do you think it's important to create an identity in this world? Is that something you want for yourself, and why?
I think we are given an identity, whether we like it or not. We can't, escape that in any way. It's been predetermined. Inside, obviously, we can fight it, and we always start with a blank slate. And I guess one of like the most crippling things of any individual is that the fact that they are assigned an identity.
What
What do we think about
I mean,
what do
that's
you mean assigned?
well, that's an interesting.
What does assigned mean?
Yeah,
Go
let's
back
let's
into-
hear what you guys think about that statement.
I mean, at birth you could be little sister, like right away, you know, or at birth, or maybe a kid, the way he looks at his mom, that's mom. Someone who doesn't take care of me, or you're a teacher, you know. So I think I kind of agree with her in the sense that we're kind of tied down to this whole identity thing. So it kind of makes sense as to why on Instagram we try to change or try to protect our identity, because it's kind of also in the society we're kind of used to categorizing everything.
Oh yeah.
So it's just like that's basically, I agree with her. That's where it becomes difficult, I guess.
I definitely disagree. I feel like you sort of, there are obviously things that are not changeable about your identity, and tons of those things, and then you kind of shape other aspects of your identity to accommodate those things that are unique, you know, that are set in stone, like, you know, your sexuality, whatever, like ethnicity, backgrounds, things like that, you can't change. But when we were talking about how you feel about your sense of self and all of that, like, I definitely feel when I'm lonely, I feel less of myself. Like, I don't feel like I am myself. And for a lot of, like, I'm a second-year PhD student. For my first year of my PhD, I felt like, you know, you get this imposter syndrome kind of thing a lot. You know, you're going through classes and everyone's kind of talking down to you. Like, you have to figure all this stuff out.
Does it get any better?
And it does. It does. Second year, I feel like
I'm a professor.
it doesn't. You said does
it? Does not get
It doesn't.
any better.
Oh, no, I'm sure
It just keeps coming up.
Yeah. I mean, it totally does. But you can also find those little aspects. Like, I just started TAing a class where I feel like I actually know what I'm teaching, which is something I haven't felt for a year. You know, and so it's kind of a nice, like, you know, when a student tells you, oh, you did, you know, thanks for all your help, like, this was really cleared everything up for me, like, that's kind of a moment where I feel like, oh, I am myself right now.
It's
Like,
really interesting to think
yeah.
that like your self is almost rooted in how you've helped like people around you. So it's kind of like your self is rooted in like your contribution to the greater community, which I think is
that's a
why
huge
loneliness
Yeah.
detracts from the self, because you're unable to like to support the people around you and like provide.
Well, we're defined in relation to others. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how we exist. We exist in relation.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I'm hearing a little bit of kind of self-threat, right? A little like my sense of self is being threatened in some way, and that contributes to, you know, this distress you felt, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then to find it back again is a nice thing. And, you know, you're always going to be sort of walking that balance of sort of things that you feel comfortable with and things that you don't, and then you integrate those things into your identity. You
And
know?
then what's
Yeah.
malleable there is you have choices, right, and how you react. And certainly, again, to loop in mindfulness, that seems to be what it's doing, is it's affording this choice in how one reacts. So self is threatened, right? Well, what do? I might get, you know, down on myself. I might be like, you're not this, you're supposed to be this. You know, what's wrong? This, you know, what you were referring to, right?
Mm-hmm.
But certainly you can approach that with negativity, negative affect, or you can approach it with a certain self-compassion, right? That everyone, to Karen's point, you know, is experiencing this. I can approach this with kindness, with patience, you know, take into account my own suffering, and be more, just kind
I
to
agree.
it.
Yeah.
So could an argument be made for saying that in the same way as the original work that was done by Paul Ekman on facial expressions of emotion ended up with like 6 fundamental, universal facial expressions of emotion, we know from having talked in other classes that Dr. Keltner's paper recently had 27, 28 facial expressions of emotion, and that's not even looking at the number of emojis on your cell phone right now in terms of subtle differences, little differences and so on. Could it be the case that rather than critiquing these constant changes on Instagram, this is just the evolution of a new vocabulary of people monitoring and making public the fact that they are in flux? not necessarily trying to brand themselves, but hey, this is who I was this morning. It's like Alice.
I wish it was that conscious
Well, I don't.
project.
Yeah, and I don't think
I'm just asking.
I don't think that's what it is, because you bring up a couple points there. The first is this I guess dictionary of facial emotions, and this ties into something you were talking about yesterday, where how you're feeling, what is actually inside of you, is hard to communicate through behavior, through talk, through all of that. So the facial emotion isn't even necessarily tied to how you're feeling. So that, I don't know if that's, you know, how you could even quantify that completely.
So actually there's two different types of facial expressions. There's those that are voluntary,
right,
which you can put on a happy face, and there are those that are involuntary, that actually reflect your inner self better than you're aware of yourself.
Right.
For example, Paul Ekman. So he videotaped a couples that were in therapy for their marriage, right? Marriage counseling, and he discovered that the best predictor of whether or not they're going to make it has to do with a certain, he called it a micro-expression, which is a very fleeting contraction of facial muscles, which are associated with the feeling of disgust. And if those micro-expressions were there, it's very unlikely that the marriage is going to stay. And why? Because here the people are really trying their best, right, to try to make it work, but if somehow in their brain there is this emotional reaction that they're suppressing and it occasionally leaks out, they have no control over that. So you have to be a little careful. By the way, I'd like to throw out another word. I mean, self is a good way to talk about ourselves, but what about ego?
Self-confidence, how do you,
I mean,
how do you define ego? How do you define self-confidence?
it has to. It's a part of self, okay, and this is part of.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Oh, she has to leave. I just realized she's going to teach my class now.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Marking's fun.
Well, thank
Jenny,
you for
thank
coming.
you very much.
It was so much fun.
Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to
Okay,
meet
yeah,
you
that was
guys.
great. We'll talk soon.
Yes.
I'm looking forward. I'm going to share it with my 106 class, if that's okay.
Awesome.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
For sure. Spread the
Sorry,
word.
sorry. Terry.
No, it came up yesterday in the discussion,
Let's talk.
and it has to do with social status. So we're primates, and as you know, there's pecking orders
Right.
in almost all primate societies, including ours. And that has a big impact on how people treat each other. It has a big impact on how society treats you. And that's something that
It's a predicament.
it's a what?
It's a predicament.
It is. Okay, why don't you
It's a
take that?
predicament because, see, we're half animals. We just are. We have all the same motivational and fear systems as animals, and we very much are inclined to put ourselves first. I mean, if we were all hungry right now and I put down a plate of food, you would all kind of try to go there first. You might act, oh, I shouldn't do that, but your instinct would be me. So the predicament is that we're half animal and we're half divine. And by divine, you don't have to believe in God, but I mean, we have a divine-like responsibility to behave with right action. And humans have been doing this for a long time. We have all sorts of animal instincts, but we've learned to act a different way. And so that's the predicament, is to honor both the dark side, the animal side, the ego, and the divine side, the light side. It's a balancing act.
I would like to throw in another word here, and that word is creativity. The reason I bring it is I was reading another study in which there was a clear correlation between sort of depression and bouts of creativity that arises during depression. And like from a personal example, about more than a year ago, I was feeling lonely due to some circumstances, and for about like 4 or 5 months, I did not have a lot of interaction with people. I had become a big introvert. But I think at the same time, those were the months where I had many bouts of creativity and started working harder for many different things. Is there a correlation between like creativity, being lonely, being introvert?
Have you ever listened to Leonard Cohen?
No.
You guys, Leonard Cohen. Anyway, he's a famous singer-songwriter, very creative, and he's very dark. So of course, creative people oftentimes are, they know what it is to feel sadness. And I'm actually going to substitute the word depression with sadness. I mean, I know you might think it's a fine line, but sadness is a very important emotion that has to be heard. And it's a very soft emotion that allows us to kind of more directly have a relationship with the world and create.
What about loneliness? Like I wanted at one, like it was like two emotions going on side by side in my mind. On one hand, I want to be socialized with people, but on the other side, I am happy being an introvert at that time because that is giving, like that is bringing more creativity out of me.
Remember what I said about introversion yesterday and how people are really starting to talk about introversion? It's important to spend time alone and to sit by oneself and not have that external stimuli and just feel yourself. I mean, sometimes people go out and they're constantly like needing to go to parties and stuff and I have to be with people. Like, how about just getting comfortable practicing being with yourself?
I think that's interesting because I myself would say I'm one of the most extroverted people I know. I feel constantly like I want to be with people doing things. And right now I'm in a leadership training type of class, and we're talking about all this mindfulness and taking a step back and being very self-aware as to how you're reacting to things, especially like in conflict mediation. So like I've been taking everything in and trying to piece things together, but the fact that for so long I thought being alone was the worst thing that I could be, it's that now it's like that's where I'm growing the most, is sitting by myself and thinking, how did I react in that situation? I was in theater, so I was very aware of how my face moves a lot, and I feel like slight little tension right here in my nose, and that's why I'm being, I think to me that's me being mindful of like what I'm portraying. What is my voice? People at some point really do trust me because of my experience in certain areas, and so I have to not be like self-conscious of myself and how I'm behaving, but mindful it's to like the fact like this is what I'm portraying to them, and I know what I want to be portraying to them and try to kind of find that balance. I think it's kind of hard to balance between being mindfulness and separating yourselves from feelings sometimes, we're being too self-conscious and too self-judging. I think, especially in the undergrads, like we try to think like, when you hear mindfulness, like practice, like think of like who you are and like things like that, but we're also like, start thinking like, I did this too much, I looked like this, I did this. I think it's really hard to find that balance. I think even like hearing all these things is like, how do you separate mindfulness from self-judgment?
Well, that was a lot to unpack, but I do want to say something. We say nasty things to ourselves a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because tends to be more of a woman thing than a man thing. It's one of the things my lab does is we actually say to people, what are you thinking right now with this ESM device where it clicks off and you have to say what you're thinking. And women are more likely to have, oh, my thighs are fat. There's some little something going on there. Mindfulness is about getting used to it. It's not stopping that voice, because if you can stop the voice, congratulations, but it's mostly just thinking of that voice as a little kid with a temper tantrum. It's like thinking of it as a little kid who's throwing a fit and just being like, that's okay, you go in the back room, come out when you're ready to be reasonable. You can go and scream and shout, but I'm going to be in the kitchen making dinner. So it's getting comfortable with that constant voice that's saying all sorts of things. Most of it's really not very helpful or informational.
So what types of, you mean inner voice from inside the brain? Then you're talking about the voice.
Yeah, I'm talking about inner speech, which for most people is all day long. More so, you're looking at me like you don't know what I mean.
But how do you? It's my questions from the whole psychiatric courses I take. So it's a great place. So Terry is here and you're here. How do you distinguish that from auditory hallucination?
Well, I actually think. I'll let Terry. You want to go first?
No,
okay. Well, I was going to say I have a pretty extreme take on schizophrenia. There's a whole book called The Myth of Mental Illness by Thomas Shiles. If you haven't heard of it, it's very good. Yeah. And I think there's a continuum, and I think that at some point you can dissociate and think that the inner speech that's natural is coming from someplace else, and that's when you kind of maybe flip over into these delusions that cause you to be schizophrenic. But I think it's a continuum. It's like how much you actually believe the voice. And the truth is, most of us without schizophrenia believe the voice. We believe what that mind is saying. All sorts of things.
So, yeah, but how about you, Terry? This was my question for many years, but I didn't ask you. Yeah.
Well, I would say that this the great individual variability. Exactly what you said. That there's a continuum, and it's it's useful to know what the inner voice is telling you, but it's something that you have control over. At least I do. Whether you're going to listen to it or not, right?
How do you have
How?
control over it?
Pardon?
How do you have control over
Right.
your inner voice?
I just kind of laugh.
Good.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's you can't take things too seriously. I mean, when you have these, it's actually I think it bubbles up from emotions.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's not always rational, right? It's not something that
You think?
it makes any
So,
sense.
so we have one thing, mind wandering, that is based on our control, I think. So when we are doing mind wandering, so in my background, I am thinking, then I put some stuff that I made ready and jumped in.
What do you
So-
mean by saying when we are doing mind wandering?
So
It's
when
making it sound like it's an active thing.
He's
So-
suggesting it is active, and by the way, I study mind wandering, and actually one of the definitions of mind wandering is that it's not
Inactive.
it's not under your control.
But can we just guide it to anywhere? So I mean this,
can-
when
so
we
that's
when we
thinking.
intentionally manipulate it. So I have mind wandering now parallel to our discussions to then jump in, add something. So I don't call that auditory hallucinations
But that's
or
just
inner
thinking,
voice because
no?
it's just thinking and then. But those voices, so have everyone experienced that? I know this is a topic because it's just make a little bit overlap. It's schizophrenia. People don't feel comfortable talk about it, and usually don't talk about it. But everyone here feeling an inner voice other than their mind wandering,
Well, I mean,
a voice from
Like
inside your
besides
brain that they.
thinking,
Like you have a constant inner monologue.
And I've been seeing on the internet recently, some people just claim they don't
I saw that too.
experience that inner
Yeah.
monologue. Yeah, and I don't know what it's
I
based
don't
off
know
of,
if
but
that's well studied.
I mean, I feel like from a couple of anecdotal conversations, I've known one or two people who've said, yeah, no, I don't, there's no words to that inner monologue. And so, I mean, I think it's still there, but it's just not
It's not so verbal.
so
You know,
verbal.
it's
My
also
lab studies too,
very
we ask
cultural.
people if it's
It's
verbal
also-
or not verbal. Sorry.
It also is very cultural how people are aware or express it. For example, Julian Jaynes, who was a psychologist at Princeton a long time ago, wrote a book. I've forgotten the title of the book. Do you remember, Roger? It's something like Bicameral Mind.
Bicameral
Yeah.
The bicameral
origins of
mind.
consciousness or something.
Yeah, but so he went back and read the Greek Iliad and Odyssey, and there were moments in the book when suddenly the gods talk to Ulysses, right? They you know, as they interpret this as the gods talking to them, right? But we would just say it's just, you know, your inner self that you're listening to, right? But so that in their society, when you hear that, that's the gods.
Interesting.
Those words coming from the great example of inner voice.
You talked a little bit before, and you talked about when you were having your little spell there. We didn't get into yesterday enough, in my view, about solitude as opposed to loneliness.
Yep.
There was this.
He means them to be different. Right? You do mean them to be different, solitude versus loneliness.
Thoreau goes into the woods in 1845, Walden Pond. He builds his own little place. He's only a mile away from everybody else, but he nevertheless says, I never found a companion that was so companionable as solitude. So obviously there's some virtues, and you can read lots of people writing wonderful stuff about solitude. I don't know if you have any thoughts on
But
this.
it's back to introversion. I mean, now people are talking about in the sense that we do need to regenerate on our own, and that there's a lot to be gained by solitude.
But again, I'm interested in knowing how people view it these days. Again, if you go back to the Enlightenment, you've got Rousseau, also like Thoreau. Rousseau loves solitude, likes the meditations, likes the walks, and so on. On the other hand, you've got Hume and Adam Smith saying solitude, all you're doing in there is massaging your ego. You need to be connected. Why these should be separate things, I think it's just part of a suite of capacities that we should be exploring at all times.
I agree.
I mean, how much time do you do with solitude?
So
Partly as a result of your faith, right?
prayers and others.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it depends on how much busy we are, but maybe an hour or less or sometimes more, depending on the feeling of loneliness or other feelings.
But how would you describe what you are doing when you are in that, call it religious or meditative state? I mean,
So, because we have mandatory religious obligations daily, and it is mandatory, sometimes you have the mood of connection with God, sometimes it's because you have to do that. So when you are ready for that prayers, it's sometimes because we have a bad occurrence or bad feelings. So then you are relying on a superpower and you start connecting and you feel, and sometimes it have some crying and tears, and then so you have it can take 20 minutes, 30 minutes like that, and then you just talk to God, or you just read some prayers that they are beautiful. I can share it with all of you. So there are maybe 6-7 of them. One of them is a lovely conversation every Thursday night. Muslims do that with God. It's maybe 20 minutes. I can send it to all of you. So the person is talking, hey, if I am bad, this is the results. If I am good, this is the results, and then some good rewards. So I want to go through that when it's a little bit we go forward. I want to just give you an idea how religion, at least Islam, is combating deep sadness or feeling of loneliness.
I want to say one thing. Prayer is meditation.
Yeah.
It's a type of meditation. Because when Jenny talked to you about Jenny talked to you about shamasha, which is focused on your breathing, and vipassana, which is also called open monitoring, where you just notice all the thoughts, feelings, and emotions that come up and let them go. But there's other kinds of meditation that are mantras. Yoga. I'm sorry?
Yoga, for example. Yoga.
Yeah, well, yoga is a movement meditation, but prayer is a mantra meditation. So when you're in prayer, you really are meditating. In my opinion, it's a type of meditation.
Yeah, and there are other sets of things we do to avoid loneliness or deep sadness that I can go through them, other than the prayer.
But like, what about those cultures that don't have, like, for example, for him, prayer is like a mantra meditation. So in a way, it's like you're guiding that inner voice, but like, what about cultures who don't, or like?
You can substitute it with any mantra you want.
Right. But I feel like cultures like heavily influence. Mm-hmm. So what I mean by that is like as a kid, you're kind of like guided to think of certain ways, but up to the point where you can decide for yourself, oh, this is the mantra, or this is what I want my inner voice to be. So what I'm trying to say is like, how do you how do you come to that point where you want to decide, you want to like think for yourself? Like, how do we get people?
Will you tell us? Will you tell us? What's been your path?
Well, I'm not really like referring to myself.
I know, but I'm putting you on the spot.
Uh-huh.
What would you, if you don't have a path, what would the path look like for you?
So I'm kind of like focused on people who have had to like survive, and so they don't really have like.
What kind of people have to survive?
For example, like kids in Africa, they have to work since they're like 4 years old. All they think about is like working in the coal mines to help their family or put food on the table, right?
But do you know that's all they think about?
No, I don't. So I guess
they have a slightly different set of stressors than us. That's probably fair, but you're right. We don't know what they think about. But I still want to see where you're going with this line of thought.
So what I'm trying to say is like their inner voice is probably different from ours, where we have been able to, like in America, for example, wherever there's like this emphasis on like the self and us choosing or what we want to do.
So we're going into a different area, which I'm happy to do if you want to. But so are we veering away now from the inner voice and talking more about?
I still have something to say about the inner voice.
So let's come back to that and let's hear what Eric has to say about the inner voice.
Because it definitely ties into mindfulness in so many ways, and it has to do so much with self-judgment as it does with being judged and the fear of being judged. So I think it's very interesting that, that inner voice that we can hardly notice ourselves sometimes can be like our worst enemy. And it can be that thing that really drives us down into like this horrible sinking feeling of like, oh, I'm not good enough, like nobody likes me, I don't feel understood or connected in where I am at this point in my life, to like ego maybe. And it can even drive you into like, wow, everybody really likes me, they understand you.
That's another version of ego.
Pushing it into like this whole nother, I want to like teach people and drive them and lead them, and I just want to be like that center focal point of attention for everybody, like, and not just because it could just be your natural self that you just feel the need to want to present yourself in that way.
By the way, there's a interesting documentary about Taylor Swift.
Yeah, I heard it's really good. I haven't seen it.
It's worthwhile. I was surprised at how good it was. I mean, she really bared herself in there. But one of the things that was relevant to what you're just saying is that she discovered that, herself, that she had been driven all her life by wanting people to like her, to, want her. And a lot of performers have had that drive, which is a very interesting motivator that motivates some people, is that they need this adulation, right, to other people to like them.
What motivates you?
Well, it's interesting. I really I really get a lot of satisfaction out of science, right? Working with students, figuring things out. I'm a puzzle solver.
There are, I think, more abstract things that motivate people. For example, during the Indian freedom movement, people went into jail, lived there for like decades in the prisons, because there was this abstract notion of getting India free. So I want to also like quote former Indian Prime Minister. So he's writing this from jail when he was in prison, and this also connects with what Roger had said about solitude. Other men condemned to exile in captivity, if they survive, despair. The man of letters may reckon those days as the sweetest of his life. So again, like for some people, because they have these abstract notions of nation or things, even when they are in prison, they are rejoicing those times because they are like writing books and writing letters and things.
Can I say something about what you said? So I lead these workshops at UCSD about how to be a human. And one time, a participant stood up and she said, when I give a talk, I'm really worried that people aren't going to like me in the audience. I have a real fear of negative evaluation. So this other participant stands up and she goes, well, what I do when I'm going to give a talk is I just go in there and I tell myself, you know what, everybody's going to like this. It's going to be great. They're going to love you. And I said, well, both of those statements are an illusion. Because statistically speaking, the truth is that some people are going to like you, some people are not going to like you. We don't know the proportions, but it's none of your business. So when you go to give a talk, it's none of your business whether people like you or don't like you. So what do you think is your business when you give a talk?
Focusing on the talk and doing your best.
Bingo. That's your only business.
Exactly. So I think I should just say one thing. I think the solution of most of our concern, you stated yesterday in your talk that you said that we should work, and you worked since 5 years ago to have a curriculum for how we should interact with each other and how we can be a human. This was exactly your words. We think it's very easy, straightforward, and unfortunately, I don't know why most of these lessons and talking about history, morality, and others are courses that happens in high school or in the undergrad. While I think a person who is in PhD, I think the brain developed. You have experienced lots of things, even relationship with the partners, being in different society. You are independent. You are away from your family. At that age, a class will be very helpful, or even for professors that they have their own specialty and focus, but a class that asks you to sit here and hear a curriculum, how you should judge people, how much you should, what is your, exactly what you said, what is your business at each time? What is the priority? What is the business? So I think this is exactly what we need. So Terry had the past 3 years at least that I was involved, he had classes that talks about thinking beyond the black box every winter. So he teaches once computational psychiatry, the other time a grand tour, and this year he's teaching a book. I mean, it's different topics. So it's helping students thinking beyond the curriculum that they have in engineering or any. So I think to add that, we need to have a curriculum. So then one course is not doing that. A course that is established by a group of psychiatrists, psychologists, neuroscientists, and I don't know if engineers, they can just tell them. So with that, we can have a better, stable relationship for these mature adults at that age to help them have the rest of their lives avoid these judgmental life.
We do way too much suffering.
Exactly,
There's
you're suffering.
definitely ways to reduce suffering,
If you
but
have-
it has to be taught.
Well, I just like to say also it is important for undergraduate students. I just attended the lunch with the dean about women in engineering, and though most of us had said at the bigger level we loved it here, the faculty are great, and a lot of it's like microaggressions from our peers, from people of student orgs. And as a student org leader, I was like, yeah, like we were very aware of that, and we had a conversation. Like I'm taught bioethics, what's right and wrong about doing testing on certain live animals, right? But never once in my 4 years here have I ever been taught how do you treat the person sitting next to you? How do you talk to the person in a different major? How are you supposed to relay your information to someone that's not an engineer? How do you talk to your parents about what you're doing? And so, like, I think that saying it, I was going to kind of ask, like, do you just tell people to be more self-aware of how they're acting, or like, is it just
Take
like
the course.
Take the course,
Take
right?
the course.
Yeah.
I teach it next quarter.
Yeah.
It's Psych 88.
Okay, yeah. And so that's like I always try to like, these people having these conversations are good because once you're aware of the issues of you're not being self-aware, then you're starting to think about it more.
Could I just make a break here? I think we've had this great conversation.
Tag on to that and just like I have.
Okay, go ahead.
So it's very interesting because, you know, everybody changes throughout like their life, and I think like talking and listening to all your guys' ideas and, you know, filling in my blanks and learning different things, that, you know, it draws into like just greater understanding. And so when I was younger, I guess it's just a fact of life is that, you know, you're still learning, and so I never felt, and like in Mexican culture, you know, you always respect your elders and all this stuff, and because they're smarter, and so I never felt like I was, you know, I had the right to like speak my mind and like tell people what I think, because I'm still learning as a person, I'm still a student. So I, in a way, I would consider myself an introvert, and it almost grew into this like shyness. And, you know, my opinion doesn't really matter at this point in time, you know, like, I'm still young, that people know more, like, my thoughts, my beliefs aren't worthwhile. But, you know, I guess it's like a 50-50, everybody has that. And other people, they always have opinions, and they want to share their opinions. And so it's almost like this duopoly in life, and I think it drives conversation in a way that you know, you have the teacher and you have the learner.
Okay, so actually it's a good segue. And I want to go back to an issue that we discussed yesterday, which was if there really is an epidemic of loneliness, you know, where is it coming from? And your upbringing is actually a major factor in that.
What is? I'm sorry?
Upbringing, you know, how you were brought up.
Sure.
And I had a breakfast conversation with Jack Feldman, who's a physiologist. He studies breathing, by the way. That's his specialty. And apparently there's a lot of work being done on how breathing affects your inner life and emotions and a lot of other things. But he brought something up, and it struck a chord in me. So when I was growing up, which was quite a while ago, and he was growing up, we're about the same age, he said, you know, we left the house in the morning, and we would just go off with our friends, and we'd spend the whole day, you know, doing all kinds of sports and games and talking and stories and things, and you know, and we would come back at dinner time, and the parents didn't, you know, were on top of us, didn't really tell us what we had to do or when we had to do it. And here's the part that he really reminded me of what it was like, because little kids, you learn a lot from your peer group. So, for example, if someone would cheat in a sports game, he'd get beaten up by the rest of his friends. And, you know, and that's how you learn how to behave with your peers. And, you know, you were telling me about your parents and how in Mexico that, you know, you respect your elders and that changes how you behave. But now, okay, now here's what his idea was. Everything's changed. Now, you know, parents orchestrate everything for the kids, and I'm curious to know what your upbringing was like. And, you know, they take them to soccer. They're always hovering over them, telling them what to do, when to do it, and, you know, and you know, I'm sure they have their best interest in mind, but the fact is that you don't have this freedom anymore. Is this true?
Yeah, and I actually really think that makes sense, is to explain a little bit of, at least part of this loneliness aspect of why we might be more lonely now. Might be that we never really learned how to make those connections because our parents were making them for us. And I think in my personal upbringing, there was a mix. You know, I was very good friends with my neighbors next door, so my parents could kind of like peek out the window and watch us, as opposed to what might happen now, where they're, you know, you have to be, you know, right here in the backyard, and, you know, I'm going to be watching you the whole time, sort of thing. So maybe there's kind of a gradient change right now, more towards helicopter parenting, and maybe that's dangerous.
Yeah. One thing that drives it though is like the college admissions process and like medical school and like all the graduate school things, because they need you to craft a really good story to get into college and to get into medical school. And so if your parents know that, if they were able to go to like post-secondary education, then they know, okay, let's help my child to start crafting their story earlier. And like I grew up in Canada, and like we don't have the same like SAT and like early college admissions process. Like everyone just kind of goes to college, everyone gets in, and it's like much cheaper too. And so I feel it's so different with my friends in Canada than in America, because they don't have that same like overarching like sculpting from their parents.
Yeah, that's why I asked you the question yesterday with like to Candice about the economics part, because I grew up in India. In India, you can definitely see a lot of difference between the people who earn more. They are like, they want to, when the kid is born, they are like, okay, in few years, either he'll become a doctor or an engineer, and then you start working for it. The parents are just like here, everything is orchestrated. Whereas if the kid is usually born in a neighborhood which does not have that much income, the access to digital phones, laptops is lower. And the access to community is much higher. There's like literally people living in one room, the whole family is living. There's another room with just a wall in between, and another family is living there. And that's how the communities are living together.
I think it's interesting because I'm like 4th generation Mexican American, and my mom's a single mom, and went to college and things like that. So I didn't have the helicopter parent type of thing. I definitely had the very protective, because I was a young girl living in not the best community, so there's definitely that restraint of like, oh, you can't go do these things because I'm just scared. But it's interesting because I think the culture's mixing of my grandmother even wanting to go to college, but she had 2 kids so she couldn't, that made my mom let me do what I wanted to do. So all this stuff I did in high school, like the theater, the choir, the sports, all that stuff, was because she let me do it. She was very much like, you need to be home on time because it's late, but she let me do it, and I think that allowed me to create my own connections, which is interesting seeing. You would think, oh, like, she's college educated, that's what gave me more access to learn what I wanted to learn. But then seeing some students, we had a conference where all the parents were engineers asking all these deep questions about UCSD and like, how can I get my kid to do this? How can I get the kid to do that? You would think that them being college educated and understanding that they went through college themselves and the stresses that they went through, they wouldn't be so hard on their own children, but they're still just as hard, which is like, I don't know if it's because of like STEM and engineering, and then my mom has a criminology degree, if that's like a difference in upbringing and how she wanted me to be raised. It's weird, I would say, to say the least.
So I agree with everything you're saying. I think you might laugh. I gave a talk in Hong Kong a couple of years ago, because I go out there and I do work. And I went to this very high-profile, expensive school for expats. And they wanted me, the parents wanted me to talk about parenting, because more and more are talking about parenting. And I gave a talk, and it was called, "What do we want for our children, : what does it matter if your kid ends up working at McDonald's?" And some of the parents loved me, because they were like, yeah, I think we need to really ask, like, what is it that we want for our children? What are we putting on them? What do we want? And some people hated me. They really did not like that, because they really wanted me to come and just tell them how to guide their children to get into Harvard. And I'm like, you hired the wrong person then. I'm not going to do that. I think we don't ask as parents what we want for our children and why. So please, when you guys go off and have children, can you do the work before you have the kids? Please, because the thing is, you know, parents don't know this stuff, so then they have children who don't learn it either.
So, I'd like to maybe kind of shift the conversation a little bit, but ask the question and then kind of propose my own of why we're seeing this loneliness in this age group, the 16 to 24, 18 to 24. So kind of going off answering your question, I grew up with an immigrant family, but so I didn't, and maybe that's why, but I didn't have the helicopter thing at all. Very similar to you, I got to just go out, go to the park with my friends, play, do whatever we wanted. It wasn't a big deal. You know, as long as you get your work done, do whatever. But then, so that was all great. Then my issue really came, and I never felt any sort of loneliness growing up at all. But my biggest issue was when you come to college. So that's where it felt like I think it becomes a problem of course you're starting over, so you don't know anybody, so that's an issue. But I think for me a huge issue was then the loudest group, which kind of begs this question, was the group that ended up partying and drinking. And so my question is, if, in addition to college, but if maybe this age group is the age group that tends to do social activities as drinking or partying related, and if maybe that, instead of assuaging feelings of loneliness, actually deepens the loneliness, because instead of having deep, meaningful conversations or sitting around playing soccer or having dinner together, you're doing these veritably meaningless activities that maybe you won't even remember, and you're really not bonding over anything, and all the conversations are pretty much meaningless. And if that's having a huge impact at the college age, because in the US especially, when you suddenly get to college and legally or illegally you can drink all you want, then that becomes what everybody seems to do at college. At least that's been my experience.
And like, how do you connect that to Candace's work? And like, because I guess I've been trying to do that this whole time, like kind of think about how there could be synergy between like your findings and Candace's, and maybe it's like the more connected, socially connected people are the people that are like in these group chats that are going, like, I don't know, planning like the parties and events and stuff, and that's why they're happier or they feel more connected or less lonely.
I want to try something here, and if I'm taking us in the wrong direction, stop me, but I just feel that I hope this really gets back to you, and again,
Margot.
There was something Erica said earlier where you sort of referred to the fact that you're the one quiet and the other person's doing all the talking, and maybe that's the parent, and you're just listening. Have you ever been talking to somebody and they're doing all the talking and you're just not even listening to them because you're sitting there going, gosh, they're still talking. Oh, they're still talking. There's no love in that. There's no love in sitting there quietly letting somebody talk when you're not feeling heard. I learned a long time ago, and I'm actually giving you this as a practice, that when somebody's talking at me nonstop and I'm sitting there just judging them, I will stop them and I'll say, you know, I'm feeling overwhelmed, but I feel like we're not really having a conversation. And it's not, people go, oh, you say that? Oh, that's so mean. No, it's not mean. It's truth telling, and it's so much more kind than sitting there in your head and saying, oh my God, they're still talking. So there's a way in which people don't know that skill, and then when they're talking, I know you brought up dinner parties, and we can come back to dinner parties, but a dinner party can be one where the person's talking at you about their most recent success at work, and they're going on about the money they made last year in the stock market, and there's really no connection. So we have to all learn how to stop the conversation when it's not connected, and to not feel bad about that. To say to somebody, I'm not feeling connected to this conversation.
I find it funny. We just talked about this yesterday, or Monday, yesterday, about just being honest that you're not paying attention, because someone will really appreciate it at that point. They're very aware that, like, okay, you're not connecting. But I was going to go back to kind of what Margot was saying. The times that I have felt the most loneliest was where I didn't feel like I fitted into either organization. Like, I didn't feel accepted to either organization that I was trying to be a part of.
But then I found myself again when I said, I know I feel this way and this is my identity and who I want to be and who I am. And I'm going to be in this organization whether there's a handful of people who don't want me here or not. And because of I'm not this enough, I'm not that enough, I said, well, I am to me. And that's when I finally got out of my own loneliness. Because I was like, I'm not trying to fit an image you have for me, I'm fitting myself. And I think that I got lucky, and I got very lucky that happened so early on in my undergraduate degree. But that's when I found, I tell everyone in my club, if this is not where you see yourself, I'm not going to take offense if you leave. Because I want you to feel like you belong here, not that you fit some image that you think I have of what my members are supposed to be. And I felt like that was like the biggest revelation I had in my undergraduate, and that's why even though I'm struggling through school sometimes, it's still what's getting me going is that I'm, for the most part, from what I know, I'm being my true self.
You're learning to tell the truth.
Yeah, and which is I think is the nicest thing, and that's not a lot of people can do that.
I mean, ask a couple of things just to, because still on this point. There's a piece in today's a very recent New York Times by Arianna Huffington. You know, Arianna is author. But there's several bits of advice about combining compassion and directness at work. And one of the last points was the point that you made there. She says, once a day have a conversation where you mostly listen. Don't underestimate the power of your silence. Instead of giving your opinion or changing the subject, invite the other person to go deeper. Strikes me as a pretty good point. Then I got an email this morning from somebody who was at the meeting last night. Let me just read a couple of points from it, so you get your response to it. If you are helping someone else, you are not lonely. You are feeling grateful that you have the opportunity to help. If you're really listening to somebody else, you're not alone because you're thinking of someone else and what they are expressing. Of course, I was raised during the Depression and World War II, so this is a senior commentary. And the entire emphasis was on those who needed help, those who were sacrificing the greatness of the country, etc. And of course, there was religion which taught us how to move out of ourselves and into the world of service to others. As these have declined and new areas of empathy, altruism, service have not kept up, what do we have? We have a culture based just on me. Everyone from advertisers to politicians focus just on what is good for me. I should not have to listen to things that might offend me. I should not ever have to lose. No wonder I feel alone. As I've moved away from traditional religion, as so many have, I remain convinced that we humans need something for direction, to establish values, to have faith in something outside of ourselves. He mentions the book Reinventing the Sacred, discusses the reasons science alone will not answer this needs, but as traditional religion and emphasis on community and service to others have declined, there's nothing to take its place. And so we think of everything from our own perspective, and this inevitably leads to disappointment, loneliness, and lack of satisfaction.
Here.
So I want to add, connect to what you mentioned about how religion talks about the community-wise relationship, and also talk about myself, because so in our culture there is this drinking is not a big deal because it's taboo if you drink in Islam. So I am not in the position to prove God or prove a religion, but it's just reporting to you how in Islam they solve this problem of loneliness, and I try to make it fast so you don't feel overwhelmed. In 2-3 minutes I wish to finish it. So first of all, there are sets of principles and regulations in Islam that helps people, like the law, like a bylaw. So you know that these are the laws. For example, deep sadness is taboo. You are not allowed to go through deep sadness. And whenever you see something here is taboo in Islam, it means that you should avoid it in advance. So maybe you say that, oh, when you fall in deep sadness, how do you deal with it? Or how when you feel loneliness? Okay, you should do a set of instructions in community, in relations with your family, friends, and others, so you avoid it. And if you are in that position, except some exceptions that a disaster or catastrophe happens, you can avoid it by following those instructions, and you don't feel deep sadness unless a disaster occurs. And I can read for you what is Islam's reaction to disasters that occur. So first of all, deep sadness is taboo, and then some narrations or some advices from the Prophet helps the followers to solve this problem. One of them is this: removing sadness from a believer is better for you than everything on earth. So this, when a student, when a child or when a youth hear this, so this becomes a rule in the brain. Okay, so this is a high priority for me. But when I see my friends in deep sadness, I should try to help him and remove the loneliness or the feeling of sadness to him. You're welcome to.
But sadness is just one of the emotions which you should embrace at times, not always try to remove it. It's not like it's not like something. It's not a disease.
It sounds like it has some sense in terms of diminishing some pain.
Yeah, pain.
But there's a certain rectitude about that doesn't allow you for flexibility.
What is it that you want us to know?
So to tell you the big picture of the instructions.
What is it that you want us to know? Why? Why do you want us to know this right now?
Because just to tell you how, by targeting the reward system of the brain and associative conditioning and set of instructions like gatherings or disconnection with the relatives is taboo. When you're so connecting to your friends, connecting to your groups, so family, yourself, there are some instructions for the self, how avoid loneliness, how to get connected with God. For when you are with your friends, so telling that believers are brothers. So I'm telling you what are the sets of rules that we as a personal experience followed in this religion, and it ends up with not feeling lonely or feeling so. There are sets of, and it's target reward system of the brain. It's all, most of the things are heaven. So if you go to the mosque, the reward is 100 times than you do it alone. So statements like this, that when I look at them in big picture, I see that it targeted against the feeling of loneliness.
What does Islam want for its followers? What does Islam want for its followers? What does it want for its followers?
So it's a good question. Priorities.
One sentence. You get one sentence. What does Islam want for its followers?
Many things.
Nope, one
the
sentence.
first, so being
not a list.
so.
Not a list. I don't want a list.
So the word of Islam answer you. Islam means submissive to God. So this is the translation of the word Islam.
Can I substitute God with love?
Submissive to God with love?
No. Can I change the word God to love?
No, because then there is a goal. Islam provide you. So this is a verse in Quran that you are not created for hobby. You are not created for playing. Or
why is love a hobby?
So because it needs to have a goal.
Why? I didn't know that.
No.
I didn't know love.
So I'm telling you what Islam says. Islam says that you are created for a set of reasons and a goal, and it's not just for things that finish. So it needs to have a consequence. So you can be a lovely person, but if there is no day after, or if there is no consequence of that, and it's the consequence on earth and keep happening until the sun.
So can I just? I'm
going
to steer us in because I love talking about Islam, but I also feel like we don't have a lot of time left, and I don't want.
And well, I'm done. I think so.
I know,
If
but that's
I
why
was
I wanted
close
you to get right to like what is it that what do you want us to really know? Here?
So what I wanted to really is that how a set of regulation and principles can help you avoid sadness, and I wanted to give you the
loneliness in particular.
Yes. Because then there is no loneliness in Islam.
Okay.
I have the verse here that it says that anywhere you are, there is God. So it's fight with the feeling of loneliness. You are never lonely.
So maybe you'd say to us, what I'd all like you to know is that I feel that the practices of Islam are very conducive to not feeling lonely. Is that a sentence we could land on? That the practices, you'd like us to know that the practices of Islam are quite conducive to not feeling lonely.
Yeah, that's correct.
There we go.
That's correct, but I wanted to give you some, because people may say that how that happens,
but
this is how it happens.
Okay.
Well, that's fine.
But we can always seek you out to get the actual formula.
Yeah, but how is,
Melissa
what are the
Erica.
principles? Yeah.
So that is very admirable, I think. But there are other cultures, like you were saying, that are not conducive to avoiding things like sadness and loneliness. And some even like to embrace it. And I think that should definitely be acknowledged. And I think that it is, not to rain down on anything, but if having experienced a lot, you know, like everybody else, you know, pain, sadness, loneliness, is educational in a way. I feel like it strengthens you, like, to the world, and it teaches you something more about yourself and who you are as a person, and it gives me strength in some ways, you know. After the weakness, it's more of just like a building and a regrowth and a rebirth, even sometimes, of your understanding of yourself and the world. And I think that can be a healthy thing if you are
I
able
think
to
that's why
witness
evolution is happening.
in a support circle, obviously, but definitely
Yeah.
I think it's.
We have about 10 minutes left, so there's two questions that are kind of important to me that I tried to raise yesterday as well.
Are they so important that I have to stay for them?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay.
You can answer them both yourself.
Oh,
before-
okay.
And then you can leave
Okay.
if you must
All right.
depart.
I do. I have to go.
All right. So the first one is that the key answer that came out of Arun Soni and all these other people at USC and so on. How do you combat this? You hang out with people that you like, trust, and so on. Certain qualities: trust, stability, people who can understand, people who are supportive, people who are sincere, people who are loyal. Those were the things that came out of the BBC survey. So one question is, how do you make friends? Second question is, what is the best technique you've found for marrying or blending or utilizing technology to create community?
I think that's a really good question.
Touch on that really quick.
I don't have much to say, especially in response to the second one. I don't have that much to say about how we use technology for that. I mean, because we're going to hear sort of obvious things that you can do, like we've already heard from yesterday. But in terms of like, how do you find friends, the first question, I mean, I'm going to just keep coming back to my pat answer, which is learn to start telling the truth. Because you can't have an honest connection with somebody and a true connection with somebody unless you're willing to start really telling the truth. And guess what, you guys? Truth-telling with somebody else never has the word you in it. Because sometimes it gets misunderstood when I say an honest connection with somebody requires truth-telling. Because they go, yeah, I'm going to tell you. You are. No. Honest connection with somebody else, the truth-telling always has the word I. It's never you. It's always, I am experiencing this. Because that's the only thing that you know is true. And you can always say, you know, when you said this is what happened for me. But learn to start telling the truth if you want to make friends. And I really do have to go.
Is that the truth?
So if anybody wants to hear more about, if you are ever interested, because I teach the course to private groups, I'm happy to come do it for a group of students here at the SOL. So let me know.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
That
Thank you very much.
was great. I hope to run into you again. You know who was on my thesis committee, you guys?
Sorry?
Do you know who one of the people was on my thesis committee when I got my PhD? Was it Terry?
Terry?
Got you?
Yeah.
I think I remember you traumatized me when I did my thesis proposal. You know, you have to do a thesis proposal. It was in that
Taking
room,
notes.
and I walked in and I started talking, and you stopped me like after 2 sentences, and just went off in this direction. And I was like, I forgive you. You were trying to be helpful.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
now.
No, he's a great guy. He was very helpful on my committee. So thank you.
Well, you were a great student.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Let's go back to those two questions though. How do you make friends? Who?
Well, personally, I guess as a kid, I didn't have like the helicopter, parenting. So a lot of the times I had to like make my own connections. My mom didn't put me like in dance class or into a sport. I just grew up just doing whatever I wanted to do. So a lot of the times, because my mom was a single mom, and then she didn't really have a lot of time like to spend on me, whatever. Sorry, I'm blanking out a little bit. Got a little nervous, but what I'm trying to say is I just learned to look for my own resources, I guess.
Yeah.
And so look for my own friends, and then I didn't really have like a lot of time to, I guess, not be myself. So I was able to find people who are like more tailored or more filtered to what I like to do, or or for example, I'm sorry, I'm getting really nervous. Let's go on. I'll come back and I'll tell you a better story.
Can I tell on to that? Because you said look. So again, that's how I'm touching all on personal experience. So some people, they don't want to be your friends. Some people don't like you. Sometimes you just have to accept that. No matter how much you like the person or how much you want to be their friend, they're just not going to have it. And I think that is the hardest thing I ever had to come to accept in my life, is the fact that, I wanted to be friends with someone. No matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't get her to like me. So it was an enlightening experience. It was definitely hard at the time, and I definitely grew past that. But I think you have to also keep that in mind. It's not just like it happens to you only. I mean, because I've caught myself sometimes. I'm like, I really don't want to be friends with that person, and I feel threatened, and so I'm gonna stay away, or things. So I guess it ties back into mindfulness in some ways. How your identity and how you obviously in your own space can accept or reject people based on.
Be honest with yourself.
And then take-home message I got from my experience is that it should happen naturally. We should never ever, at least I should never ever try to prove myself to anybody.
Right.
When you are trying to strategize things and proving yourself to people, you lose the priority at each point, and then it's not you. Because what you have is inside you and your personality. You try to mix something. They don't spend that much time to you. Their judgment just ruin the things. You should naturally try to be what you are, and then naturally make friendship, and never try to prove ourselves to somebody. This was my take-home message from the...
A better story for you guys. So I have a very busy schedule. I don't really have time to go out and make friends, go to a party, go to a bar. Where I make my friends is in the classroom or in my dorm, for example. And so now that I'm out of a dorm, I found that it's really hard to maintain these relationships because they're not just immediately there. So, but I realized that in the dorm, I had this friend that we took the same classes with. I still have this friend, and we still take the same classes. And then our time together, so we have the study group. And we have the best time just studying together over and talking about the same subjects. And I don't have to go out of my way to be to go meet her somewhere else. It's just in the comfort of my own home. And for us, that's comfortable. And then I have these other friends that I made in the same dorm that kind of resent me for not making time for them, but I just don't have the time. I have to study, I have to work, I'm a parent, so it's just there's too much to do. So I don't have the time to make these explanations. I can't be there because I have to go take my sister to to her therapy or whatever, I don't have that. I'm not going to explain that to them every time. But someone, the girl I was telling you that I take the same classes with, she understands that because she sees that, and then she's with me, so she doesn't require extra maintenance. She's just there with me, and we study together, and we just get ahead.
I think it's an interesting question just because I was reading, I don't know what article it was or podcast on loneliness, but it was saying that right now people report they have less close friends than they did in previous generations. So it's maybe they have 1 or 2 versus 10 in previous generations. So people have acquaintances but maybe not close friends, and I think that's a really interesting concept, the number of close people that you feel you need to support you in different aspects of your life. That seems to be an important thing, almost more than just general friends.
How many friends do you have on Facebook?
I don't know, thousands.
How many close friends?
570.
How many?
Yeah. I think I have 1,000.
How many close friends did you have when you were in college?
In college?
There was no internet.
Well,
Can't have friends without internet.
actually, this has been studied. There's a lot of literature on this, and it turns out that most people only have a few really close friends.
Yeah.
That they keep over their life. And friends do come and go. People that you went to school with and so forth. The other thing to keep in mind is that as you get older, it becomes more and more difficult to make friends because of the fact that everybody's really busy. Also, at a certain point, your friends start dying. Even the ones you have. So it's very lonely for elderly, because they're on their own, really.
What's the number for you for close friends?
In terms of, I probably have, 3 really, really solid friends that I've been working with and having really can talk to them really about anything. But you're right. And then you have these other people that you enjoy, colleagues and people from the past, and you really it's great. So we're social creatures, but there's a limit on how many people we can bring into our lives.
Yeah, on this, can I just add in there the Varun Soni, the dean, the USC chaplain I was mentioning yesterday, was suggested 3 friends, if you can really find 3 really close friends. There is a thing called, which some of you will know, called the Dunbar number, which is Robin Dunbar's number of how many people you technically have in your circle. I think it was 120, I recall. He also wrote a paper, he also wrote a commentary on a paper that was about, I think this is relevant. It was a paper called Embers of Society, Firelight Talk Among the Guansu Bushmen. This was Polly Wiesner's paper, and she spent years watching these Bushmen. And most of their day, although they interacted during the day, it was only in the evening, sitting around a campfire, that they had personal conversation. Much more conversation, personal revelations and so on, real communication. And that's why she called it Embers of Society. I asked her when she was here last, well, so have they got any cell phones now, the Joatsu? And she said yes, and it's not as close and convivial and communitas as it was. So, but Robin Dunbar's number, as I said, was roughly 120. He wrote the commentary on this, how conversations around campfires came to be. This is part of the second question I was asking, which is what's the best technology you can find for marrying or blending or utilizing technology to create community? What's the equivalent of sitting around a fire that is helped by your technology? Because the Dunbar number of 120 people now, a digital Dunbar number is thousands, right? But you don't really know them. So how do you use the technology, if possible, in some way, apart from just...
Well, I think... Oh, sorry, go
ahead.
Phoning
people I was going to just kind of mention, I don't necessarily know how to use it, and that's I think we're going to address. But when I'm thinking about just the number of people I know and consider me a friend versus who I consider a friend, and kind of our image on social media, I'm not a huge fan of it. I don't really care what people think about what my days are going on. Family, huge extended family, they're always like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why don't you post on Facebook? And for me, I think we're just kind of, I'll try to synthesize my thought. It's that your closest friends are who you're comfortable sharing your most embarrassing moments with, and not necessarily what you want to put out on social media. And I think that's an issue with our 16 to 24-year-olds. Again, kind of wrapping back into your self-image to those thousands of people. But when, this thing's called Finstas, fake Instas, that you only have, your 16 friends that you can post pictures on and complain about something, and you don't care if you look tired and messy, or you can have, these things across your face.
So maybe that's called a fake, a Finsta, but it's, more real.
It's a more real.
Yeah.
So it's a fake Insta that you don't show your 780 followers that you have on your Instagram account that you share with the world, but you share with these 16 people, what you truly want to be. And I think that it's weird, and kind of maybe answering that there's forums that people feel really close to people across the internet more because they're truthful as to what this forum is talking about, and it can be toxic because it can be unmanaged, but utilizing it to be your true self and not be embarrassed.
So Gwyneth Paltrow,
yeah.
the actress,
yeah,
recently had a party and asked people not to wear makeup.
That's lovely.
And it changed the character of the party. Because you sometimes, especially in that business, you dress to kill, right?
Yeah.
You are projecting an image, and you take off all that war paint, and you're just basically another person.
Mm-hmm. That's super interesting.
Goop.
By the way, Goop
Yeah.
is on Netflix. There's a series, and one of them, which I saw, which is really interesting, was some of the people in her company went somewhere in the South, maybe I've forgotten where it was. It's maybe South America, but and had guided, psilocybin experience with magic mushrooms, which came up in the discussion last night, which was interesting. And they came back and they interviewed them. And they said, well, it was really intense. I learned something about myself, and and often it lasts for the rest of your life, which is an interesting event. That could happen with someone who's stuck and doesn't know what to do.
So my comment, and I don't know, we should probably start maybe wrapping this up because it's past, people may have things to do, but was gonna, in response to your what technology or how can we marry that, I think it's not really maybe not like what physical technology, but how you're using it. Mm-hmm. So the biggest issue that I see even with people like around my age is, so the phones connect us, obviously you can text with people, the TV connects us if you're sitting around and talking about what you're watching together, but the issue becomes when you're sitting with other people and they're on their phone instead of being present in the moment, and that's what you're also saying, having this conversation, having the dialogue, being present with another person. But if you're using that technology to escape, then that's naturally going to detract from this feeling of community. That's going to deepen this feeling of loneliness. So I think any technology, video games, TV, phones, can bring people together if you're using it in the correct way to be with another person.
I think it'd be interesting.
I was just gonna say, I think that's a really good point. Just because I went camping last week, or like this past weekend with my lab, and like it's amazing how much people all pay attention to like what each person is saying, literally around a campfire. Because I was camping, and like because no one has service up in Joshua Tree, so everyone is like really engaged in the conversation, and you can like go so deep on like really interesting and personal topics. And yeah, I think.
How many were using looking at cell phones?
No one, because no one has service. Yeah.
No service up in Joshua Tree.
Yeah.
So that's where the problem is.
AT&T sucks up there.
It's a lack of attention. It's an attention span issue, because instead of doing this, you just go here.
And then people feel like animosity when someone's like obviously looking at their phone and not paying attention to the conversation. But I think like using technology to mediate a gathering.
So what's even more dramatic here at a restaurant?
Yeah.
There's two people sitting there having dinner together, and they're both.
I do this with my wife a lot, and it's very weird.
No, my
you go to restaurant and you order there.
No, that's my significant other. I'm like, put your phone away right now.
But see, I think it'd be interesting if we catch ourselves doing it, just step back and say why, and just to, again go back to I forgot her name. What professor was it again?
The professor.
Karen Hopkins.
Karen.
Yeah.
Just to be honest, like say like I'm not here right now. I want to be on my phone, and that might not be a good thing. It might put a strain on your personal relationship, but I think that's a good step, right? Because then you're kind of asking yourself, like, why am I don't want to be sitting with this person right here? Why do I want to be on my phone right now?
Right.
And it's I think it's a scary thing for people to do, but I think it's a good thing.
Because you get more reward when you are in the phone. So in the phone, if you should work on it and think, if you should put curriculum for that.
Yeah.
So in the phone, I have a couple of Telegram channels with 100 friends. So I get lots of news, interactions, comments, political comments, many things from them that is full of attention. But it's something we are avoiding that. But with my wife, we just say that tomorrow we should do the insurance, or for example, after 7 years of saying I love you, so you don't keep saying that. So when we go to restaurant, we are just saying some other things. Okay, tomorrow the insurance.
It gets worse.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you know what the other person's going to say.
Exactly. So this is what make me away of interactions on this, because I know people. This is his mindset in these topics. So I don't see full of reward on that. So this is bad. So good. This is the reasons behind of many of the times we go to that.
So the conclusion we've come to is that the challenge that we all face is how to become a better companion than a foe.
Well, the issue is I don't think you can like phones are made to be like so addicting, right? So there's nothing you're gonna say that's more interesting than the entirety of the internet.
You can't get little notification bubbles pop up above your head.
Visual, like audio.
But the good things I learned from the social media, when you ask how technology help you, the way technology helping me is that to understand that friends are in good shape, they are happy because they share their happy time, and also it's persuade me to practice them. Now my friends are in at least California, whether in Bay Area or here, they go to camping, or they go to the skiing, or they go to the pool, or a couple of hobbies like this that when I see their gathering, I just become, it persuaded me, motivated me to just do that. And then as a result, we had discussions in the pool last night. After a couple of years, I did this. They invited me to
After a couple of what?
Years.
Oh, I thought you said beers.
Yeah, but we had Coca-Cola before that.
Okay.
Speaking of food,
Yes,
Yes.
we have lunch downstairs.
thank you all for being here.
Yes, thank
and
you.
we are going to go down to the Salt Cafe.